Welcome to a new episode of AW Confidential. If you know me, you know how much I enjoy the art of wine. And yes, it is an art. And when I get the opportunity to support a woman or any women in this industry or an industry that we know it to be male dominated, it's a huge bonus. Dr. Laura Catena always saw wine as more than a beverage. It was educational and purposeful. In a sea of wine lovers around the world, her passion for wines has helped her take her father's vision of 30 years ago to create some iconic wines. Catena Zapata is the oldest Argentine family winery, founded in 1902. Their wines have more 100-point ratings than any other wine in South America. Dr. Laura Catena is a fourth generation vintner and managing director of Catena Zapata in Mendoza, Argentina, which was voted one of the world's best vineyards to visit in 2023. Hopefully, I will get there. Laura is with us today to share a bit about her journey and hopefully offer some of her best recommendations. Laura, welcome.
Thank you so much, Yvette. I have to correct one little thing, which
Yes,
is
please.
we were actually chosen by this group of 500 food and wine lovers as the number one world's best vineyard. It was a ranking of the 50 best by the same people who do 50 best restaurants. And we were chosen 2023 number one.
Well,
Yeah.
I am so honored. That is
It's
huge.
crazy.
That is
It's
huge.
huge.
It's
It's huge. Last year was Antinori, world famous
and I
winery.
love Antinori.
Right? We all love
Yes.
Antinori. And then this year was Catena. I call it Catenita Zapata because I can't believe it. And then you're only chosen number one year. And that's why I corrected you
Oh,
because
wow.
next year it'll be another winery. So we
I
only have
didn't
to
know
June
that.
of number one. It's like
Ah.
Miss America.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. And on that note, just congratulations. I mean,
Thank
that
you.
recognition and all the accolades that, Catena has had is it's such an honor to have you here today. So thank you so much. As a wine lover, I speak for all my
Thank
wine
you.
lovers out
Thank
there.
you. Thank you.
And as a Latina, Hispanic, Latinx, I think it's just it has to be recognized. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
being
Thank you.
here. Now, I as I mentioned before we jumped on, I love your story. You left Argentina without speaking a word of English.
No, no,
You
I spoke a
you
bit.
spoke
I
a little
spoke a
bit
bit.
of English?
I spoke some English. I just couldn't write it, but I
Okay.
could speak English a little bit because my dad had studied in New York at Columbia when I was 2 years old. So I did speak some English. I did not write it very well.
But you came to the US and you actually went to Harvard and received a medical degree. Very different from the wine business.
Yes, yes, that's true.
And then I read that you fell in love with wine on a trip to Bordeaux, France. Is that right?
Yes, that's true. That's true. I went to Bordeaux with my father as his translator because I had studied French, and everybody said, why are you studying French? You don't really need to speak French. You speak Spanish. You speak English. At that point, my English was better, and I just wanted to learn French because I thought the books of Sartre and Camus were beautiful, the existentialist authors. But then it ended up being really useful because now we have partnerships with a winery in France, a very famous winery, Chateau Lafite, the owners of Chateau Lafite. We have a partnership with them, and then we sell wine through a network of French uh, negociants, negotiants.
Well,
So yeah,
you have to learn Italian now.
I actually learned Italian.
Oh my gosh.
I taught it to myself by books. Now you have all these
Wow.
amazing apps and
Yes.
things, but it's actually a lot easier to learn Italian when you speak Spanish. So I did a little cheating.
That is a good point. Over the summer, I went to Italy and I felt I could defend myself. Then
Yes,
I went to
yes,
Paris and and I had
yeah,
two high school, 2 years of high school French. It
yeah,
it
yeah,
wasn't helpful at all. So you're
yeah,
absolutely right. Now,
yeah.
it was hard to now you actually oversee the operations at Catena, is
Yes,
that right?
yes. I'm in Buenos Aires right now, actually, at our office in Buenos Aires. Yes,
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here. I don't know what time it is there, but thank you.
it's okay. It's 1 p.m.
Okay,
1:10.
perfect. Now, it has been a journey for you.
Yeah,
And one of the things that I read and appreciated as a woman, I read that early on, when your children were younger and you were trying to do all this work, you had them in school in San Francisco in Argentina, and they
yes.
sort of split
They
their
would go
time
to
half and
both
half.
places. Yes, crazy. Yes.
I mean, it's I mean, just everything that I've read, it feels like you have made the unconventional work for you.
Yeah.
And it's admirable because I'm sure that you've had some challenges and have had to wear different hats along the
Yeah.
way. Would you
Yeah.
agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I now look back and I say, how did I manage to be a practicing emergency doctor and running this winery? But, I think we humans, we kind of rise to the occasion, or at least we try. And that's what I did. And it was very important for me that my children really grow up bicultural, that they feel very Argentine and they also feel American. My husband is American, and so that's part of their culture as well. And I think I pretty much accomplished the goal, but it was pretty crazy many times. I'll tell you one time, how now that I don't have kids, I don't like kids crying on the plane, which is really awful. I feel like such a hypocrite. When I
You're
had
not the only
children,
one.
I was like, why are these people upset that my child is crying? And now I'm that person. And now I like dogs. I want to be sitting next to people with dogs. Okay. So one time I told my kids, I'm so tired. I had the three of them. The two boys, the oldest one might have been something like 9, and my daughter was 2, and the other one was 4. And I said to the oldest, I said, you're watching your sister. And I was sitting there in the middle between them. And at one point, I hear somebody tapping me on the shoulder. And my daughter had decided to throw food to the person behind her. I'm still embarrassed by this, thinking, what kind of a mother or person am I? And the person was actually really kind. Can you believe it? I would have been very upset. Can you imagine some kid throwing food at you? But anyhow, so I had a lot of moments of great embarrassment. And, I never missed a shift in the hospital. Just one time I got confused and I happened to be at a birthday party for a kid and I ran and I made it within half an hour. But I had a lot of close calls because when you're doing so many things, you do tend to sometimes forget something and you can't miss a shift at
Absolutely,
the
you're
hospital.
human.
Yeah,
So
I
you're
missed a few
human.
flights in my life.
Well,
I'm
if
very,
that's and I'm curious about that because we're talking about challenges that we encounter. So one of the things that I really want to ask is, I think, when one of the biggest challenges we encounter in business
yes,
is figuring out what the world needs and then creating it. I think that's
yes,
how it works.
yes,
Sometimes we have an
yes, yes,
idea, and
yes,
so I would never think to connect medicine, wine, these very two different worlds.
yeah,
Can
yeah,
The first part of my question is, can you recall your thought process as you prepared for this pivot? Because it's a
yeah,
significant pivot.
yeah. Well, I did both together for a long time. And,
Wow.
people at the winery knew they could not call me on my days I was in the hospital. Everybody had my Google Calendar, and those were, days no calls for Laura, which was non-sustainable because you can't run a business and not be available. When it's your business, you have to be available all the time, on vacation, nighttime, whatever. But I did take my time deciding to do both. And basically, I love medicine. I still love being a doctor. I'm still a doctor to all my friends. I love getting medical questions.
Wow.
Sometimes I'm at a party and somebody will say, "Oh, I'm sure you get asked this all the time, and it probably really bothers you, but can you tell me what you think about this rash?" I love getting
Wow.
questions like that. I love rashes. I love to try to figure out what a rash is, especially if I can fix it and it's easy. And so I love medicine and I love practicing medicine for so long. And then I fell in love with wine, mostly as a consumer. And that's why I really love doing wine tastings with people that are not in the industry, because people love wine. Wine tastes so good. It makes you happy. It's got all this history in a bottle, the history of a family, of a place. There's nothing more interesting than wine to me. There really isn't. And so I love that. But I learned first about wine as a consumer because I used to go with my father to France as his translator. I had no intention of ever working with him. I used to go to wine tastings at wine stores when they would have a producer, and I would be, one more person in the row of chairs, tasting and listening. And I fell in love with wine that way. And so when it came time to work for the family, it wasn't on purpose. Basically, I went to this wine tasting that my dad asked me to go because it was the first time that a South American winery was invited to this very prestigious event, the New York Wine Experience, run by Wine Spectator in New York. And I was at my little booth. This was in 1995, a long time ago. And people would just not even taste my wine because they didn't recognize Argentina as a country they knew. They would go to the French wineries, the Italian, the US wineries. And I realized that this dream of my father's to put Argentina in the wine world map was an impossible dream. So I went into wine to help my father. And I did have the wine bug, so it wasn't some big sacrifice. And then I fell in love with wine, but then I didn't really want to leave medicine because I love both. And I did both for 25 plus years. But
That's
the pivot
amazing.
was really a gradual one because at first, really, I loved wine, but I didn't know anything. So I couldn't really see myself doing wine. If you don't know anything about something, how could you be, working in it? So I had a long process of learning, and it was fun, because I was working for a family business. It was fun to have my thing, which was medicine, where I was an attending physician. I was running an emergency department. I was, in a pretty, good position where it was my own thing. And then I could learn with my father. And then when I was ready, I could run the show for the family. And I think, that's something I advise to people whose families have maybe, wine business of any sort, maybe a store, any kind of business, that, do your own thing for a while, get your confidence, learn how to be a boss, learn how to have a boss, and then go into the family business.
I love that. I love that. Now, it would seem to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that along this journey, you took some calculated risks and you did go after spaces where you saw a need. So, among them,
Yeah,
and I have to mention them, you used your science background to elevate wine.
yeah,
You have books to raise awareness about the
yeah,
quality and character
yeah,
of high altitude Argentine wine. And your current passion is teaching the wine trade and wine lovers how to drink in moderation. I mean, why is using, medicine to educate people and the wine industry so important to you?
yeah,
Because that's a
yeah,
beautiful,
yeah.
that you're doing really amazing work.
Yeah, no, this work of moderation is very important. Well, I'll tell you a story, Yvette, about when I started working with my father. I was an emergency physician, so I saw a lot of alcoholism. I saw
Mhm.
accidents that happened because somebody was drunk driving. And I saw a lot of bad things around alcohol. And so I went to my dad and I said, Papa, you know, um, I'm a little worried about our family business. How do you feel about, making this thing that, is good for many people, but also causes some harm? And my dad, like, Laurita, you have nothing to worry about. And I say, what do you mean? He says, at Catena, we make fine wine, and there are no fine wine alcoholics.
Mm.
He said it as a fact. And the thing is, I think there's some truth that, the more you're into the history of wine, the taste of wine, sipping it slowly with food, the
To
more moderation
respect.
is part of your culture. And in my culture in Argentina, it's very unacceptable to get drunk. People really do drink in moderation as part of the cultural norm. And if you think of the Mediterranean diet, the Mediterranean diet is, one glass of wine per day with your dinner, and maybe a glass of white with lunch in the olden days. But this was much lower alcohol wine. And so it's really wine in moderation, not even alcohol. It's a wine in moderation, which, doesn't have really high alcohol. And so, my father said that. And then, I went to work with him, and I wasn't thinking a lot about moderation, other than every time I do a wine tasting, I tell people what moderation is. I have it as a rule. I don't do a wine tasting without talking about moderation and how to consume wine so that it's actually good for your health. So that I've been doing for 25 years. But what I did realize early on was that I could help as many people making wine as I could as a doctor. Why? Because what we did, our family, elevating the quality of Argentine wine and the recognition of Argentine wine, that gave jobs to millions of people. And also, if you're producing wine as a commodity, like, that it's just all the wine's the same, like, like ketchup, I mean, I love ketchup, but there's not that many brands of ketchup, right? There's like one or two, because it all kind of tastes similar. I hope there's no ketchup people listening to me.
I know, I
But
know.
yeah, I mean, all you need is the fries, right? The fries are important. But, wine is so different, and high-end wine takes a lot of effort. You have to study the vineyards. You have to have really good barrels. You have to be planting the vineyards in the correct place. We have lots of acres, but only about 15% of the vineyards we have are of the top quality, the ones getting the 100 points. That's a small percentage of vineyards, because really there are some places where you plant that are a lot better than others. I mean, that, like Rutherford, Stag's Leap, Tocalone Vineyard in the Napa Valley that many people know, the famous vineyards in Burgundy, something like Chateau Lafite that is owned by these partners we have in Argentina. So what I realized was that by elevating the prestige of Argentine wine, then people could make finer wine and they could make more money, and we could feed more people, and more people could send their kids to college, and more people could buy a house, and more people could afford a nicer car that's safer, and better food. And so what I realized was that when you run a responsible business, and we've actually brought a sustainability code that today is used by everybody in Argentina, by all the wineries, we brought it to Argentina. We do a lot of work sharing our research at the Institute with all the other producers. If you're a very responsible business person, look at you. I mean, you have a business that you help people. Like every day, you're helping thousands of people. A very responsible business that's there also to make money, because we have to support ourselves too, is elevating the lives of other people, and that is just as worthy as being a doctor or teacher, which or nurse, which are the traditional helping people professions. And once I realized that, I thought, wow, I really need to be good at this, elevating Argentine wine thing, because all these people depend on me.
I,
I had to
it's
write these books to elevate the knowledge of the Malbec variety.
And I mean, it's your thinking outside the box that appeals to me so much, because we're trained to be a certain way, we'll think a certain way. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of admiration for what you're doing. So thank you for all that work. Now, Catena wines are among the world's most highly rated, and I have to make sure that I include that. Anyone who knows the industry or loves wine or reads about it knows that it's a male dominated industry. I think to this day, there hasn't been just great change. There's been some change, but um, within that environment, you have delivered huge wins along with your team. And I was curious, what has been the greatest lesson that you have learned while working in a heavily male environment, and what have you learned about yourself?
Oh, those are two very different questions. Well, I did start in wine coming from medicine, and medicine is very co-ed. You have a lot of women in medicine. In fact, today there's more women graduating from medical school than men. So there will be a future where there'll probably be more women doctors. And so I was coming from a profession where there was a lot of equality. And I think that was really good, because I was already accustomed to being at the same level as a man in my profession. And it was interesting because there were very few women in wine in Argentina or anywhere when I started. There would maybe be one of the people in the lab would be a woman, but really it was mostly men. And in a way, I kind of went in fast because I was my father's daughter, and I was always very conscious of that. I didn't want to be somebody that got the job because I was part of the family. Nepotism is my worst enemy. I really think people should earn what they have. And so I came in though from medicine. I was fairly confident, but really, I think my father was a big part of why I felt supported, because he had a mother, Angelica Zapata. We have a wine named after her, that was the headmistress of the local school. And she thought that education was the most important thing. She had 2 sons and 2 daughters, and she was just as tough academically on the sons and the daughters. She thought, women could work. And, we're talking 1930s, 40s, like that was a whole bunch, much even more
Revolution.
backwards era. Yeah. So he grew up with this very strong woman. My mom is a very strong woman. She runs a company. And so for my father, it was automatically to think that I could run the company. And that was very novel, because there were no other female CEOs in Argentina running wine businesses, and very few around the world. I think now the situation has changed a lot, because there's a lot of family wineries, and families have daughters, and often the daughter's more interested than the son, or maybe families have only daughters, like the Antinori family we were talking about is 3 daughters. So the daughters are running the business because there's no brother. I mean, I don't even want to think what would happen in that family if there was a brother. Who knows? But so I think it's kind of fun the way the wine business is changing because of the family aspect of it. How have I changed? When I started in the world of wine, I didn't want to be invited as the one woman. There would be a panel, and I would see that I was invited maybe more because I was a woman. I would feel, I want to be invited for who I am. Maybe that's why I've written so many books and done so many things, trying to prove that, hey, I'm a person first and, a woman second. However, I feel like these new generations of women, like you, my daughter, I have a 18-year-old daughter, love the camaraderie of women, just like men over the centuries and thousands of years. They have all these men's clubs. My husband plays golf, and he's in one of these clubs is an all men. And, when I was in college, I mean, I would have told you, any man that's in an all-men club, that's terrible. Like, why do you need an all-man club? And I watch my husband with his guy friends playing golf, and they're so happy. I'm totally fine with an all-men club. I think that's great. Do whatever you want. And I'm also really happy with my all-women groups sometimes. You get together with your girlfriends. You don't want a guy in the group. You just want to be you and your girlfriends, right? And so what I discovered about myself doing this was that actually there's need for both. We work with men so well. Co-ed groups are the best. The guys that I work with love having women on their team, and vice versa. We love mixed teams. The more 50-50 you can get on a team, the better the team's going to work. I really believe in that. On the other hand, I really like to mentor women and men, but I take a little extra care with the women. I want to make sure that they get everything I have that I can teach them. Because they're going to have things happen to them that are different than what's going to happen to men, and I have specific knowledge that I can give them. And so now I feel like sometimes I'm invited to a conference that's all women, and I'm fine with that. I think that's great, because we do have some different sorts of experiences, and men do too. And I think it's totally cool for them to get together and discuss men stuff. Why not?
Absolutely. And, you did mention that there is change happening, thankfully. I mean, there's a
Yeah,
lot to go.
yeah,
So, for anyone who's listening, being the first at anything or doing something different takes faith and courage. And I wanted to know, can you offer advice for anyone looking to make a transition or do something different in their own
yeah.
lives, in whatever it is?
Yeah, yeah. I just read this really cool book about the creative process that I don't remember the name, but I could send it to you later.
Yes.
But it taught this really simple technique. And I think this applies to anything you're trying to do. It said, first, study and gather your thoughts. And one thing that I do is I have this little book that I carry with me all the time where I just write ideas all the time. And I often wake up in the middle of the night and start writing things. A lot of people do that.
I
So then, I'll write something like, do some research on Malbec in France in the 18th century, or, on something that I think is interesting, because I'm always writing some book, like, wine and health. Every time that I see some article, people send me articles, I collect them. So you kind of develop your knowledge, you research. And, for me, I was a doctor. I knew a lot about medicine. I had like 5 years that I was just studying wine, and accumulating knowledge. And then this technique says, and then leave it and go do something else. And I think, let's say that you're thinking, okay, what's going to be my next career move? Think, but then go on a vacation. Take 3 days to go hiking and don't think about it at all. And then come back to it and start putting some structure to it. And I think that without the research and the knowledge, you can't do your next move. And I think that also that research and knowledge tells you what's really going on in that field. Let's say you want to go into wine, right? And what are you going to do in wine? You can produce, you can do sales, you can be a sommelier at a restaurant, maybe get a part-time job working as at a restaurant, serving wine, or a bartender, and just see, do you like that? Because a lot of people fantasize about something, and then when they're actually doing it, they might not like it as much. And then, wine sales, like, do you want to be a salesperson? Do you want to be a salesperson? Do you want to be a buyer? And it's different skill sets for both. So I think that anything you can do to see what it might be like to have that job before leaving your other job, because there's this rule that from Malcolm Gladwell, that author that writes The Outliers and Blink, and he's written all these books, that you need I think it's 10,000 hours to get good at something.
I
And
have heard that.
you've heard that. So he always talks about kids that, when they start learning piano or any instrument, and like the first month of lessons, they're in heaven, because they're learning little simple things and happy birthday, and it's also entertaining. And then they don't want to do it anymore, because then comes the hard work, where you have to learn the scales and the movement of the hands, and then you're playing really boring stuff, and you're listening to professional piano player, and you're saying, oh God, I'll never get there. And then come the 10,000 hours, and then you can play at that level. And the same is with a language that you learn, with anything, being a doctor, your profession, Yvette, like doing what you do, that's hard. You put in, thousands of hours. And so I think that you have to realize that there's going to be a while where you acquire knowledge and expertise. And if you try to switch right away, let's say you are, a musician and you want to become a winemaker, it's not going to be fun to be a winemaker, because you don't know anything, So that'll be the one recommendation is learn a lot, do some part-time stuff, like maybe help somebody for free. I don't know, say to one of your friends that is in wine sales, like, hey, can I come help you set up your next wine tasting? Or, do some volunteer work, maybe in the area that you're looking at, and see if you're really passionate about it while you accumulate knowledge. So when you start doing it, something. That would be the one advice about.
That's great advice.
Yeah. And then the other advice I would give is, this is maybe obvious, but I find that anytime that I feel like I'm helping people, I work a lot harder, because it motivates me. Helping people, helping nature, the work we do at the Catena Institute, all this research, it's a lot of work, but I know that I'm helping my country and all these people. And, I'm not a saint. I tell you, that motivates me, and it motivates my team. People want to work in a business that is good, that you're doing good things for other people. It's easier to get up in the morning at 6 a.m. every day if you're helping others. And so I think that find something that makes you feel like you're helping. We all help in different ways. So make sure there is that piece of your heart that's satisfied.
That is wonderful advice. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I love to do at the end of interviews is leave a message with our community. And as a wine lover, and for all those wine lovers who are listening, what would be your best or favorite recommendations of Catena wines? One red, one white.
Okay, so we have a wine called the Nicolas Catena Zapata that's named after my father. That is Malbec with Cabernet Sauvignon. So this wine has, the power of the Cabernet Sauvignon, which a lot of people love, like from Napa, from Bordeaux, and it has the velvety tannins of the Malbec. And it's basically the perfect wine because everybody would love it because it's elegant, it's rich, and it's smooth, and it ages really well. So it's a wine that I recommend to my friends to collect if they're buying, a couple of bottles for, an anniversary celebration, or, a lot of my
The
friends buy
holidays.
the holidays. A lot of my friends will buy a case when their kids are born, or they'll ask me to give them one as my gift. I give often to my friends a gift of wine, and you do the vintage of the birth year, and then you drink it for the first time when the kid turns 18. And you know what I do? I drink it when they turn like 5 and 10 because I feel like, hey, I'm celebrating their birthday.
Of
So you
course.
can drink up your kid. I have a nephew that I have actually bottles from all the vintages of my relatives, like all my nieces and nephews. And I have one nephew that's like, Laura, don't drink my wine. And I was like, okay, you're right. I almost did the other day because it's a really good vintage. So the Nicolas Catena Zapata, Cabernet Malbec. And then for the Chardonnay, I would do Catena Alta Chardonnay, which is this Chardonnay that has the minerality from the high altitude, but it's got also this creaminess, and you have it with
Mhm.
scallops, with risotto. So it's got, a touch of oak to make it delicious, but not too much. And this is a wine that I take to any party and it's gone. I arrive, I open the bottle, I come back to offer it to somebody and it's gone.
Oh,
So both these two wines I would highly recommend.
well, I'm excited. Laura, thank you so, so much for being here. I've learned so much and I've just been super inspired. Can you make sure you tell our listeners how to find your books, your wines,
Yeah, yeah.
more about
So
you?
Yeah, so basically our wines, Catena, Catena, which means connection in Italian. Actually, it's an Italian name because my family my great grandfather came from Italy to Argentina. And so our wines, really, you can find them in, like your small sort of specialty wine store in your neighborhood, but we also sell our wines in Total Wine, in Costco. Usually they'll have one of our wines. In
Wine.com, right?
Safeway. Oh, wine.com is great. Wine.com
Yeah.
has all our wines. And if you want diversity, wine.com. If you use Vivino, you can usually find all our wines at somebody near where you live. Yeah, I mean, our wines are pretty widely distributed. But if there's a special wine like the Catena Alta Chardonnay, might not be as widely distributed as the Catena Classic Malbec. So I would go somewhere that has one of our wines and say, hey, can you get me, a case of this? Or,
Okay.
some other
And
wine.
your
Yeah.
and your
Oh,
books and
and so my
any
book, I mean, they're basically, you just put the name Laura Catena, there's Gold in the Vineyards. That's
finds
basically
everything.
an illustrated book about wine. I highly recommend that if you're getting into wine because it's 12 different wineries around the world. And I tell you stories that you will never hear in one of those dense, encyclopedic books that are kind of boring. I feel like wine has to be lighthearted. You can read my book with illustrations when you've had a little to drink. Then Malbec con Amour is all about Malbec. And then Vino Argentino is sort of a journey to Argentina and Argentine wine. But I mean, Amazon has them, but all other book vendors, you can often find used copies of my book. Vino
You
Argentino
can
is from
Google
2010.
everything
Yeah.
nowadays. It's
I
just
mean, you get, oh, there's actually an audio version of my first book. There's a Kindle version of it as well. Yeah. So you
perfect.
can find them.
And your social media, I know we can find you on
Oh, yes.
Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah. So Instagram is Laura Catena MD, as in medical doctor. And then my Twitter is Laura Catena, but I don't use it a lot. So it's mostly Instagram that I'm at.
And Catena Wines. It's
And
also has the
Catena
handle.
Wines, yeah, they're very, very active. And they
Yes.
answer your questions, anything you need. Yes.
Yes. Laura,
Yes.
thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay.
And continued success to you. And I hope to see you again soon, hopefully in
I
Argentina.
hope so. Oh, I hope so, Yvette. And great success to you and all the wonderful women that follow your advice. I am one of them. So
Thank
thank
you.
you very
Thank you
much.
so much. And
Okay.
thank you all for joining us on this special episode of AW Confidential Podcast. Talk to you soon.